Hi there. So, my first question is to myself, to you, is it ethical to read someone psychically without their permission? So, that's the first question I'm going to respond to. Um, the answer predominantly is no. However, if someone presents themselves in a certain way to the world, then that presentation can be read. So I'm talking about, you see a celebrity on television and they present themselves in a certain way, and there's always a certain aura, if you like, around them that can be read. So people might call this a good judge of character, or just looking at their clothes, their hairstyle, and the stance they take in life. That is presented in a very sort of shallow, first level psychic presentation. So let's take a Hollywood actress, say Marilyn Monroe. We would see that first level as she's an actress, she's very beautiful, she carries herself well, she wears nice clothes, or we might perceive her completely differently. Each individual perception is based on our own belief system of this reality, our own paradigms, our own traumas, our own preconceived notions, brainwashing, mind control, experience, both in this life and in the past. So we take all of that, and then we make an informed judgment or impression of someone. So that's why so many different perspectives can be so different. When it comes to making that judgment or that impression of someone, if you take all that ego aspect of yourself, all those traumas, impressions, mind control, the way that you've been brought up as a child, the experiences you've had, take all of that and then you make that judgment and that impression of that person, you are having to filter that impression through all these different layers within yourself. So basically, what you're seeing is like if you were to sort of see a prism of light, you are seeing that person through this very narrow prism of light with all these filters, and the information you get could potentially and most probably will be very skewed. If you make that judgment or impression based on what you think is clarity, but you're bringing all these preconceived opinions and belief systems and notions and traumas, everything that's ever occurred to you since childhood, it's shaped your experience, it's taken you to a point of perspective, and everything you look at in the world is filtered through that, and it is going to be skewed, it's going to be off kilter. If you're someone, though, who has worked upon yourself, and it doesn't mean that you have to have taken a specific spiritual path or a religious path, you could be someone who is eating very cleanly, you could be somebody who's highly into sports or dance or some other movement, you could just naturally be someone who's able to naturally filter all these traumas and issues and opinions and outside perspectives and brainwashing and the system and everything. You might be naturally able to filter that, so you will have a much more clear perspective. When you look at someone, you're far more likely to make a clear judgment of how that person is. So this is all in the first layer of that person. Now let's just say that you do take a spiritual path in life, and in that spiritual journey, you will naturally be working through traumas. That doesn't mean that you're free of trauma, but it means that trauma is coming up from being buried and it's constantly being integrated. So you're in a process of integration yourself. It's not really a journey where you desperately have to clear yourself all the time. That can be very falsely misunderstood. And people often think, oh, I'm having to clear, and I'm having to clear myself, and I'm having to work through this and work through that. It's not really such hard work. It happens within your everyday life. It happens within the experiences that you have and the challenges that come to you, and the communication that you have with the deeper aspects of yourself, or with higher dimensional guides, or with extraterrestrials, or your higher self. Or it could be none of that. It could simply just be the aspect that you perceive as the more knowing part of you. It doesn't matter which words you use for this. So if you're taking that path, this conscious spiritual path, if you like, you're far more likely to be in a state of integration and clarity, to be able to make these judgments. Now, there are some people who then take another step. They consciously commit themselves to walking a spiritual path, and they exercise parts of themselves, or this happens naturally. They may be born with this, so it isn't something they have to work for. It's actually there from birth. They have this ability to see deeper, despite traumas and issues. And sometimes the traumas themselves can actually create situations where they become sort of separated from that physical self. They move into more of a disassociation. They're still able to psychically see things very clearly and make connections to the higher aspects of the universe while still being very traumatized. That's another presentation. What I'm talking about here is somebody who takes a conscious spiritual path, who's worked on actively wanting to have more insight into the world, to psychically read people, read situations, read planets, read energies. So we're looking into energy workers. So that's another level. And really what I'm getting at here is somebody who's fairly clear, somebody who is consciously taking that path. Within that, one would be able to read situations and read planetary systems, civilizations, all sorts of energy constructs, and read people. Now, there are ways that that can be done. Some people might use tarot cards or some other form of focus to be able to read a person or a situation. Other people don't need necessarily to have those focuses, and then they can read people themselves just by looking at these energies. I'm going through basic stuff here just in case there's anyone watching who isn't aware of how one can read the energy of someone else, how it's done, because it's quite confusing, because there are people out there that are saying, I'm psychic, I've been psychic since birth, I read tarot, I do this, I do that, I channel, and someone else will say exactly the same thing, and both those individuals are presenting completely different opinions. So let's take a person, let's call him Joe Brown. And one psychic who's been working for years as an empath and a psychic and does tarot cards, is channeling this extremely high guide, will say that this person, Joe Brown, is a really horrible person. Don't trust him. You might have someone else who's saying the same thing. I've got this really high guide and I'm channeling and I'm psychic, been psychic all my life. And Joe Brown is amazing. What's happening there? Well, again, we're looking at potential filters within the psychic. Is that person working in disassociation, so is still looking through traumas? Is that person in a good alignment? And even if that person's in a good alignment and a good flow, is that person seeing a different aspect of Joe Brown? Are they looking at one part of Joe Brown, filtering through judgments that they have without realizing that they have those judgments? Psychics can do this. Channels can do this. No psychic, no channel is infallible. No psychic, no channel is going to get it right 100% of the time, which is why the most powerful psychic for you is yourself. One always goes with one's own judgment as priority. So you can read the newspapers, you can listen to people's opinions, you can watch the television, you can read reports, you can do research, you can watch all the videos of all these other people that are doing research, you can listen to all these different channels, but ultimately your opinion is number one. if your opinion is skewed and you have lots and lots of traumas there and preconceived notions and brainwashing, etc., you might not even know. So there are ways to find out. If you are, let's say, triggered emotionally, and there'll always be some kind of negative emotion within that. It will be anger, hurt, the disbelief that you have when you're faced with someone saying something that you see as false. Your disbelief will be tinged with anger. It will have horror in there. It will have this extreme feeling of being upset, grief, jealousy, this righteousness that makes you feel like I'm right and everyone else is wrong. It will put you into a polarity. And it will trigger you. You might be angry for days. Days doesn't mean you're not spiritual, and it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. But it does mean that your filter is potentially somewhat clouded, and there are ways to bring clarity into that view of someone. If you are able to look at someone completely objectively, and this is the way to go, even if you have trauma, it's an objective viewpoint. So when I look at someone and I perhaps present something about that person as a psychic, as a channel, as a clairvoyant, as an empath, people will say to me, especially if that person is on one side of a debate, especially politically. So let's, for example, take Brett Kavanaugh. If I look at Brett Kavanaugh, the person who's just been appointed a judge on the Supreme Court in the United States of America, if I am to look at him and make an opinion of him, if my opinion is positive, people will say, well, you're polarized, because what about the accuser? If we look at this situation of Blasey Ford and Kavanaugh and the situation that they're in, Blasey Ford is saying that he sexually abused her and it was definitely 100% him, and he's saying absolutely categorically it was not him. If I were to make an opinion and say, well, Brett Kavanaugh's telling the truth, people will then say to me, well, you're polarized. You know, you're jumping in from one viewpoint. That is not correct. That is not what polarization means. I can look at, let's for example, say Blasey Ford, and I can look at Brett Kavanaugh. And I can say to you that, in my opinion, Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth. In my opinion, Blasey Ford is compromised. That may or may not be lies. That may or may not be brainwashing. That may or may not be whatever. I can make that judgment through looking at the energetic fields of these two people when they are talking publicly and in their photographs. I can make that judgment. And I'm not using this as a potential example. I genuinely can make these opinions. Blasey Ford is compromised, is all I will say here. And Brett Kavanaugh is telling the truth when it comes to this situation. I instantly will have people tell me that I have jumped into polarization through political beliefs. What's polarized here is the opinion of Blasey Ford and her claim and the response by Brett Kavanaugh. We have a she said, he said. We have a is she guilty? Is she innocent? Is he guilty? Is he innocent? That's the polarization. The polarization is not the viewing and the perspective. That is only polarized if you are allowing your filters to come in. So if I were to say, oh, I'm a Trump supporter, even though I live in England, I'm a Trump supporter. And if I was in America, I would vote Trump because I'm a Republican and I think he's great. Therefore, I'm going to decide that Brett Kavanaugh's innocent because he's the chosen person from Trump. That is a polarized judgment. That's a polarized opinion coming from my political beliefs and my filters. That's not objective. And therefore, one would be polarized. So if somebody has seen perhaps a comment that I've written on Facebook or a status saying Brett Kavanaugh is innocent, they might believe or decide that my judgment and my opinion is made because I'm using these filters of my own political beliefs. And that's fine, but they've made that judgment and that assertion based on their own filters, because that's most probably what they do. That is not how I have come to this judgment. Number one, I'm not politically motivated at all. I don't have political interests per se. I have political interests only because of what I know about polarity on this planet, ascension, what is happening to Earth, what's happening cosmically. That has given me a political interest because everything's playing out on the political scene. Therefore, I might act as though I'm politically motivated. It's the same thing with Trump and with Hillary Clinton with the election. I did not look at these two people and think, oh, well, Trump's a Republican, so I'm going to vote him because I believe in Republicans. At that time, when the election in America took place, I didn't really know the difference between Republican and Democrat, to be absolutely honest with you. I'm in England, we have a completely different political system, and I haven't studied American politics. So I've learned what Republican means and what Democrat. I didn't know Hillary was a Democrat, and I didn't know that Trump was a Republican. The judgments I made, or the impressions and opinions I made, was simply based on what I know. And what I know is photographic energy readings on a psychic clairvoyant level and channeling, or communicating with the higher aspect of myself, or the aspect of myself that has a wider perspective. You don't even need to use the word channeling. That can put some people off. So I had already at that point worked for 7 years professionally as a psychic clairvoyant reader, reading through photographs. And anyone who has been a client of mine will know that I'm incredibly reluctant to do a reading without a photograph, because it's photographic energy that I read. So that can be on film and in a photograph. That's how I've learned. That's how I've been taught, if you like. That's how my psychic awareness is developed, through the energy I see from the person, and I need to see their face. And then it opens up for me a matrix of energy, and that matrix of energy will show me their emotions, and it will show me their life and experiences, things they've done, things they haven't done, things they're likely to do, opinions that they have, belief systems that they have. I've been doing that professionally for 7 years, and for many, many years longer in a non-professional capacity. And as a child, it used to happen automatically. So I'm one of the individuals that was born with this. The reason why I'm making this video is because I have seen a lot of psychics and clairvoyants and channels communicating with their guides and coming forward with their channeling and their opinions. And those opinions are different to the information that I have. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong, and I'm not saying that I'm right. Neither am I saying to you, oh, I've been doing photographic readings for 7 years professionally, therefore I'm right. That's not what I'm saying. You'd have to go and ask all my clients what they think, and they can tell you whether they think that I'm accurate or not in the work that I do. So that's sort of some background information here in what I'm doing. And so what I'd like to say is, on a psychic level, on a spiritual level, is it ethical to read someone? For example, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Christine Blasey Ford, and Brett Kavanaugh. Is it ethical for me to read these people psychically when I've never met any of them, and they haven't given me permission to read them? So the answer generally here would be no, it's not ethical. There are certain caveats to that. One would be the training ground. So if you have a young, psychically aware person that is destined within their blueprinted pathway to one day work globally as a psychic, then they will be taken through what's called the training ground, and this has happened to all the starseeds, and they will be given permissions when it comes to reading. That doesn't mean that you can look at someone and say, well, they haven't given me their permission to read them, but their higher self has given me permission, so I'm going to read them. If there isn't any greater need for anyone to know about that person other than your own practice, and you keep anything within the training ground confidential anyway, because you'll be taught confidentiality through your guides or through your deeper knowing or your memory, your DNA activation, all of those things. If there's no need for you to speak about that person, then, and a lot of psychics do, they will read whoever you want. Is it ethical? Not in my opinion. When it comes to someone like a celebrity or a politician, as I said, they put themselves out there in the first place. So there is a wider aspect to them that can be read without individual consent, simply because they're putting themselves out there. When it comes to a situation like a general election in a country, and that is going to create ripples throughout many years and also create differences in timelines, then there is a much larger range that can be read. And it really is up to the psychic themselves whether they choose to publicly read those individuals or not. If they overstep boundaries and they're not aware of those boundaries, they will potentially get some karma from that reading. Some psychics might decide it's more important for me to talk about this, therefore I don't mind getting the karma. Other psychics might decide that there is no karma and they don't believe that. That doesn't change the fact that there actually is. With me, I work with these boundaries and etiquettes incredibly closely. I don't want to overstep boundaries and etiquettes and create karma for myself or for anyone else. So I work within the ethics that I have been shown by this aspect of myself that I refer to as the white-winged collective consciousness of 9, this higher dimensional intelligence and consciousness. I take my lead from them. So I work within these boundaries. So I'm going to go specifically here to the Christine Blasey Ford and the Brett Kavanaugh situation, because this is the situation that I feel is just, or I'm told, that is just as pivotal when it comes to ripples throughout years and shifting in timelines as the general election. Maybe not quite as much of a catalyst, if you like. The Trump-Hillary election was far greater a catalyst, but this in itself, when it comes to truth, justice, fairness, and showing the world the truth, the great reveal, this is incredibly pivotal. So with Trump and Hillary, the election was more about shifting those global timelines from a negative polarized control into a positive polarized control, whereas this Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford situation is about truth. It's also about the divine feminine and its expression as distortion and its expression as balanced, aligned divine feminine. That's a whole other subject, and I potentially can discuss that. What I'm actually looking at here is literally my psychic reading of these two individuals without going beyond the boundaries of what is not allowed ethically, if you like. For example, you know, I'm not going to tell you how many times Brett Kavanaugh has kissed his wife. I'm not going to tell you what he ate for breakfast. I'm not going to tell you personal childhood secrets. But what I can tell you is what is specific to this situation that's been presented to the world. The permission doesn't need to be given here because it's already being broadcast. I know I'm speaking basic stuff to those of you who are spiritually aware, starseeds. I know what I'm saying is basic, but I am addressing different levels of individuals who may view this video. So I'm speaking to beginners in psychic readings as well as those who are advanced, and it's probably frustrating for some of you who just want to know what I'm going to say. So I'm going to get to that. So the permissions here when it comes to Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh, it's to do with this situation. What she is saying, what he is saying creates this energy, and the permissions that are allowed are what they're talking about, but it's done on a psychic level. So that means the first level of the aura which is presented naturally by anyone who has their photograph taken, especially celebrities. That's going deeper. I'm looking at, you know, deeper levels of the auric field. I'm not interested too much in going too deeply into Christine Blasey Ford, simply because there's no karma there, but it's a very uncomfortable feeling to go into. And as a psychic, you do feel what the person is feeling, and you see experiences that have been around them, and it's incredibly uncomfortable to go into Blasey Ford's psychic matrix, because it's incredibly distorted, and there's many layers within that of different personalities that have been broken and traumatized. And I don't really want to go into that sort of a physical structure, because it doesn't feel good. I will go somewhat deeper into Kavanaugh because we have clarity within his fields. It's this clarity. I'm not saying that he's perfect, and I'm not saying that he's not done things that are, you know, that he's done things that are out of integrity, but there is not the distortion in his fields that there is in Blasey Ford. So I'm going to go to what levels I can go to that are comfortable for me and that are not outside boundaries. So I'm going to start with Christine Blasey Ford. So what we have here is a person who, when she made her statement, as I said, her statement, her story is compromised, and the story that she's telling, and I'm being careful not to go beyond these boundaries or to create karma, the story she's telling is inaccurate, and it did not happen the way she said it did. There are some things that are truthful, and that is when she talks about trauma and abuse. There is abuse in her fields, it's quite extensive, and she has been traumatized and her memory is affected. Those things are true. However, it's absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with Brett Kavanaugh. There are multiple abusers within her, and it didn't happen anything like she's saying. That may be because she has a memory, a pre-implanted memory, a false memory screen. Within that, and one of the questions, when I say she's compromised, one of the questions I get from a lot of people is, does she know she's lying? The answer to that is yes and no. On one level, deeply within the true core of her, she knows she's lying. There is another superimposed version of her that she's able to go into that thinks she's telling the truth. That's why I'm saying she's compromised. And that's all I'm really going to say on her, and that's all that really needs to be said. So I'm now going to go to Brett Kavanaugh. Okay, so Brett Kavanaugh, without going into his personal fields, where no permission is given, without going beyond boundaries and without creating karma, and there's not really that much karma to create. The karma would be created within Blasey Ford, because we're looking at service to self structures deeply within her. With Brett Kavanaugh, those service to self structures are surrounding him, but they're not inside his fields. So I can go a bit deeper with him. So with him, first of all, he's what I would call a Blu-ray individual. 100%. Many Blu-rays are not 100%. They're 80%, 90%. There are some that are 100%, and he is. Brett Kavanaugh is a 100% Blu-ray individual, and that's just to say he's Blu-ray. It's just a energetic template. It's just a name to give to the presentation that he has, so that I can use that term Blu-ray to be able to describe his fields and his personality, and the personality of the Blu-ray energy. Similar to astrology, but instead of using energy from the planets, it's using energy from color frequency and code. It's, you know, different. So what is the Blu-ray energy? Well, the Blu-ray, 100%, one thing they would stand for above all else is not necessarily truth per se as an energy. It's very close. It's more about what is right. Now, that can be perceived differently by different people, obviously, but it will depend where that Blu-ray individual places their energy within the life that they live. So they'll have had a blueprinted plan, and they will follow that plan. So the Blu-ray energy will then be specific to that life's journey. So say we have a Blu-ray that's a channel. They will be very focused on their channeling and on their spiritual path, with exclusion to all else. I mean, they will still bring other things into their life, but what I'm saying is it's almost like an obsession. So a Blu-ray channel would be obsessed, not fully, because they would know how to not be obsessed, but it would become like an obsession. So the focus is much stronger with a Blu-ray than it is with other individuals. It's more to the point of obsession. And it's very much based on what is right rather than truth. And truth comes into that because truth is what is right. So the planetary systems or dimensions that Blu-rays come from, if you like, is where there's a certain structure to everything. It's not even that they have to think to themselves, well, is this good or is this bad? It's very much, this is the way it is. So when they incarnate, they will have this view of this is the way it is. And it will be formed by their upbringing and by the choice of where they put their focus. So let's look at someone who is working in law. And I'm specifically looking at Judge Brett Kavanaugh. So what he's got around him within that Blu-ray energy is wanting to do what is right and what he sees as right. And what he sees as right is, because he's gone into law, it would be very much based on truth. What he sees is as right is the truth. And he would look at law, he would look at the structure of the law, let's say the American Constitution, as the main focal point of that legal education. And because he's got this obsessive Blu-ray ability, he's able to look at all these different parts of law, and he's able to analyze it very deeply and follow it to the letter of this Constitution, which has been the focal point of his learning. So another part of this story is that one of the ways the cabal try to control the people of this planet is through the legal system. They do it through many, many systems. One is through the legal system. The Nine said to me quite a few months ago, and it's in one of the videos that I presented, it's one of the transmissions, they said, they spoke and addressed directly the Illuminati construct and said, you have checkmated yourselves. I never really understood what that meant. They've checkmated themselves. What does that mean? Well, with all this sort of Ford Kavanaugh situation and the communication that I've had with the Nine over this, I've now realized what the checkmated yourself means. It's not just the legal system, it's the system itself, beyond the legal system. But the system is set up to trap or to restrict or hold back and control the population of Earth. But that very system is now being used against them. The system that they laid as a trap is now being used against them. And they didn't foresee that. This is occurring in the legal system. So when you've got someone like Brett Kavanaugh, who is a Blu-ray individual who has been working for the system, unbeknownst to him, he thinks he's simply working for truth and justice in the law. He's working for the system. They're quite happy with him because he's doing the job of judging everyone based on the system. But now we're at a stage where things have changed, where the system is now being used to be turned back on the cabal. The very system and the traps they laid are now being turned back on them. I can't fully interpret this because I'm not studied in American law. So I can only tell you what I see energetically here. So what we've got here is someone like Brett Kavanaugh, who is not of the family. He's not cabal. He's not deep state. He's not within the within that practicing service to self structure. Yes, he's lived within and studied within and worked within the system, but he's not part of it. So what he follows is his obsessive ability to interpret the law. And he will interpret the law with the Constitution, the American Constitution, as the basic framework, because that's what he has grown up with. And so all that Blu-ray, I need to do what is right, that's there, is there interpreting law based on the Constitution. Well, the cabal, they don't want the original Constitution, American Constitution, as the law. They're sort of distorting it and changing it and taking bits away and adding it, and their ultimate aim is to completely change it entirely so it's no longer recognizable. Brett Kavanaugh, once he'd been made a potential nominee, because he's not cabal, they didn't want him on the Supreme Court, so obviously they engineered the situation to prevent his confirmation into the SCOTUS. Okay, so all that is part of the story, but I'm looking here at his actual personality and the claims that were made against him. So because he's got this obsessive belief, this obsessive Blu-ray belief that he must do what is right, is it possible for him to do something that he believes is against the law? No, it's not. It really isn't possible. And when I say it's not possible, obviously it's possible. Obviously he can go out there and commit a crime. What I mean is his entire makeup of who he is will not allow him to commit a crime, to knowingly commit a crime. So would he go into a shop and steal a pint of milk and smuggle it in his bag? No. It's not in his field. That's not where his mind focus is going. He sees himself as an honorable person, as in the place of justice, of judge. And his whole life as a Blu-ray, as an obsessive Blu-ray, he has wanted to achieve. So he'd be the winner in this area and the winner in this area, and not in a competitive sense. He's not competing with any outside structure. The competitive sense is within himself. His own sense of achievement is what keeps him going. And then when he achieves and he sees, I've won this race, or I've won this competition, or I've done really well at this particular sport or this particular activity, it gives him a sense of achievement. And that means everything to him, everything. That's all he follows in life, is what is right, because he's an obsessive Blu-ray. That is his matrix. That's his incarnation. It doesn't matter who he's worked with, how many cabal members he's been friends with and had tea with. It doesn't matter what cabal laws he's passed. None of that is in his makeup. He's not interested in the cabal. He's not interested in Illuminati versus non-Illuminati. That isn't even in his head anywhere. He is simply interested in that sense of achievement that tells him that he is living the way that he should live as a Blu-ray, obsessive Blu-ray. And does he even believe in Blu-ray? Probably not. If I went up to him and said, did you know you're a Blu-ray? He'd probably think I'm nuts. It's not about that. It's about that me interpreting the energy within him. So would he go into a shop and steal a pint of milk? If he thought stealing that pint of milk was going to lead to some truthful, fair justice, but even then he'd be able to find the loophole because he can see the loopholes. That's why he's so good. He would look and think, well, hold on a minute. If I steal this pint of milk and it leads to this justice, I've still committed a crime because it's illegal to steal. So he wouldn't be able to do it because he sees justice like this massive, great network of algorithms, and he can Well, he does what a psychic would do. What I do when I read someone energetically, he's doing with the law. I'm not saying he's psychic, but he's got this obsessive blue ray mind, and it's 100%. 100% blue ray will obsessively focus on this structure that they've become obsessed with to a extreme degree. Therefore, it isn't possible for him to go and steal a pint of milk. It's physically possible for his body to steal it, but it isn't possible for him to do that because it's fully against everything he stands for and everything he believes in and everything he is as a blue ray individual. Therefore, to suggest that he would sexually abuse someone is ludicrous, literally. It's just nowhere in his fields whatsoever. Did he do this? No, no, no. He's absolutely innocent. It's not in his makeup. It's not in his fields. Now, some people could say, well, could he have got himself so drunk that he's blacked out and he doesn't remember what he did? Okay, so what would happen in this situation? Because these are questions I've been asked. I've been obviously talking about this on Facebook and other sites and emails and things with people. So if he were to black out, if he were to get drunk so badly or drugged, or if somebody drugged him or somebody tried to get him to pass out and do something, the innate energetic frequency still locks in even when you're unconscious and passed out. So that frequency, although obviously drink does tend to change that somewhat, and it will change your values and it will change your ability to contact that core structure, it still remains within the fields. So he still wouldn't be able to commit a crime that bad, that when it's against another human being. And it's not really about abusing another human being in his mind. To him, it's about going against the law because it's not right. He absolutely obsessively sticks to what is right. Getting drunk in the first place and passing out, is that right? Well, there's no law anywhere that says you can't get completely drunk and pass out. Therefore, that wouldn't necessarily be in his sphere. But there is a law that says you cannot sexually abuse a woman against her will. There is a law that says you cannot do that, and therefore it would not be done by him. There's another aspect to this blue ray obsessive personality that he has, and that's the record keeping. The record keeping was, again, diaries and everything. That was incredibly important and part of the obsessive blue ray personality. So to him, where he's going at that time as a college student, where he's going and who he's meeting would be obsessively recorded. There's no way he'd miss it out. There's no way he would miss out a party or an event in those records, which is why he kept bringing up his diaries in the court case. It wasn't a court case, in the hearing. That's why he kept bringing up his diaries. A lot of people might think, why is he always going on about his diaries? Why is he always going on about how great he was at basketball? It's completely irrelevant. Yeah, it's irrelevant to them, but it's not irrelevant to a Blu-ray. These are achievements. So my response here, I'm just telling you what I see energetically. Did he do this? Did he abuse Christine Blasey Ford or any woman? The answer is no. Is he telling the truth? Yes, he is telling the truth here about this situation. He's telling the truth. So the other question I've been asked is about Brett Kavanaugh's anger. So people have said to me, regardless of whether he committed this act or not, in the Senate hearing, he was so angry, and lots of pictures have been shared of him with this really sort of contorted, angry face. And people are saying that proves that he is either guilty, or it proves he's not competent enough to serve on the Supreme Court because of his anger. So I'd just like to touch on that a little bit. In the in the hearing, the anger was not the kind of anger that one would see in someone who is out of control, or who is who has tendencies to be aggressive or verbally abusive or physically abusive. The anger that he was feeling in the hearings was really more of an incredulous shock that he had been accused of these crimes, and there was a lot of frustration because people were asking him questions that he felt were irrelevant and pointless questions, which I would agree with that. But the predominant emotion here was not really anger or frustration. The predominant emotion was pain. There was an incredible amount of pain emotionally. This was extreme hurt, like he had been like he had been wrongly accused of something. The problem is with a 100% Blu-ray, and the fact that he places such high store on achievement, to accuse him of this and to suggest that this is something he has done and therefore he's not worthy enough to be on the Supreme Court, he's not worthy enough to be taken seriously, on top of the fact that he's had threats against his family and he's being protective over his children. On top of that, one of the main reasons for his pain is everything he's ever achieved in his mind, this doing what is right, that will have given him this sense of accomplishment. And with that sense of accomplishment comes a sense of security. And all of that was taken away. The sense of accomplishment was taken away. The sense of security had been taken away. So to accuse someone of something they didn't do on a grand world stage scale is bad enough. But to accuse a Blu-ray, for them, this is devastating. And that's an understatement. So what he was experiencing when he was showing what people are perceiving as anger, I personally, knowing his emotions and being able to feel his emotions, personally, there was no anger there. It was more determination and assertiveness in wanting to get his case across and present the truth. The predominant feeling was pain, emotional pain, and deep upset. And when I empathically felt that, I could feel it obviously myself, as any empath watching him would feel it. And when I was watching Blasey Ford, there was nothing really there to empathically connect with. There, you know, apart from obviously there is abuse there, but because of this being sort of layered with a compromising energy and a part of her that's aware of lies, all of that changes the energy of that abuse, and so there's nothing to be empathic with. So when you try to be empathic with her, you don't even want to be empathic because it's a horrible feeling. When you go into that empathy, then there was no real genuine distress. It was all very much like watching an actor or an actress on stage or in a film playing the part of someone who'd been abused. And to be absolutely honest, and I'm really not being judgmental or nasty here, I'm just saying what I see and just observing really and making a statement of that observation. I have seen actors and actresses on television and on stage play a more convincing role emotionally so that you can be empathic. You can be empathic with that character because their acting is so good. You empathize with the character that they're portraying within that story. I've had more empathy with actors and actresses than I did with this lady, with Blasey Ford. There was nothing there to be empathic with. The emotions were not strong enough, even for an actress or actor, let alone a person who's genuinely making a statement about something. But with Kavanaugh, there was extreme empathy, and the pain was all consuming, and kind of gave somewhat of a choking sensation as you are watching him speak, because if you're empathic, you would feel all this pain in your own heart chakra and in the throat chakra. It was horrible to watch. The other question I'd respond to is the one where people say that you want to believe Kavanaugh because he's Trump's choice, and you are a Trump supporter, or your political leanings go towards Trump. Therefore, you would create that because it's what you want. Well, what I can say to you is, before I'd heard about Blasey Ford accusing Kavanaugh, I wasn't particularly following that story. I knew that Kavanaugh was Trump's choice for Supreme Court judge. But before I watched Christine Blasey Ford's statement and then watched Kavanaugh's statement, I would take myself into an objective place. So there is no agenda, there is no political leaning. And I can assure you, and you don't have to believe me, and it really doesn't matter to me whether you believe me or not. That's not the point. I can assure you that if I had felt empathy with Blasey Ford, if I had felt that she was telling the truth, and if I had felt that Kavanaugh was guilty of what he was accused of, I would have said so. It would make absolutely no difference to me that he is Trump's nominee. That is not the issue. The issue is, where is the truth? So you don't go into polarity and think, Blasey Ford, is one side of the polarity, Kavanaugh's the other side of the polarity. Which polarity am I going to side with? So if I choose a side, then I'm in polarity because I'm against the other side. That is not how objectivity and neutrality work. You do not go into polarity. You remain in objectivity, and you simply observe, and you state your observations, and you make your opinion, and even your opinion remains open to more information. That's how you become able to make an opinion in the first place. So you take that objective place, you take a step back, and you don't allow any agenda to come into your viewpoint. You can't see with clarity if you have these agendas and these unhealed traumas. You must remove them. You must take yourself into that neutrality, objectivity space, and then you look at the landscape before you. So it makes no difference to me which political party is funding who's a Democrat, who's a Republican. It makes absolutely no difference to me. I don't have any agenda, and obviously I can't have an agenda, really, because I'm not in America in the first place. I don't live in America, I live in the UK, but that's not really it either. The final question I would respond to is, people have said to me, Magenta, why are you so interested in American politics when you live in the UK? And some people will say to me, I live here, as if they have more of a right to decide whether Blasey Ford is telling the truth or not, or whether Kavanaugh is telling the truth or not, simply because they live in America. Well, I would say again that the energetic presentation within individuals is non-locational. It's not locational to a country. So it makes no difference where you live. You can view these energetic presentations within individuals' auras or matrix fields, regardless of where you are. As for being interested in politics, as I said earlier in this chat, I'm not interested in politics per se. I understand what's happening on this planet within the different dimensions, and I understand that the third dimensional polarity game and the revealing of truth is playing out predominantly on the American political scene. So that's the answer to that question. The other part of that would be that what happens in America affects the whole planet. And the 9 have shown me that if you were to look at planet Earth as a disc, and I know lots of people do, but that's not what I mean. But if you were to look at America as a flat disc, energetically, you would you look at Earth as a flat disc, place America right in the middle. So if you were to see that disc as perhaps a pool of water, you take a pebble and you throw the pebble into the middle of the pool of the water, which is where America is, and then all the ripples would come out from that pebble splashing into the water. That's what's happening energetically. America's the central point, and all the ripples are the rest of us. We're still getting those ripples. Therefore, what happens in the American political scene affects the whole world. How that actually happens is in multiple ways. And again, one takes an observer viewpoint as to how that's going to happen. We don't necessarily make a judgment about how that happens. We have the trust, if you like, that this polarity situation that we have on this planet is changing. It's this extreme polarity is ending. This cabal rule, this service to self rule is ending, and energetically it has already ended. It's just filtering in now into the third dimension. So yeah, I think that's everything really for this chat. Sorry, it's a long one, and I did want to say what I was seeing and what I have picked up empathically, energetically, psychically, spiritually, and channeling wise, as I have seen other psychics say different, and not judging them at all, but I am just putting forward my energetic opinions and perspectives on the situation. So thank you for listening. Bye.
In this channeled transmission, I enter into an expansive, transformative and activating exploration of interdimensional dialogue, discussing the mechanics of Stargate Ascension. This cutting-edge information holds key codes, maps and coordinates for the starseeds on Earth, as they go through this process of DNA reconstruction and regrouping of cosmic memory themselves. The significant codex of information is downloaded to the reader, as they, through this sacred text, are called by the Dragon, Excalibur, Crystalline Light Geometry, Atlantis, and the Emerald Flame. I am so very pleased to present my new book, The Infinite Helix and the Emerald Flame,